Well, good Monday morning, everybody. How are you?
Good morning.
Good morning.
I am going to be
Morning.
attending a country concert this Friday, so we might have a country week just to get me prepared. Got to get in the right mindset for my annual country Kenny Chesney at Gillette. I am excited. If you think country is just a bunch of rednecks, I encourage you to give it a try because that's what I thought country was, and I am a fan now. So give yourself a try to today's country. I hope you will enjoy it. Who's got a win for us from over the weekend? Our first weekend here on the new rules. What do you got, Jeff and Linda? First hand
Okay,
up.
so we had fabulous wins this weekend. Number one,
Right.
we met surprisingly, we met a gentleman who owns his own brokerage in Georgia. And we came with the agreement for him to sign so we could show him 2 homes on the 16th. And he was livid. And we didn't warn him. He has no idea what he's signing. He's very, very disappointed in us. And it was brilliant because we looked at each other knowing that this guy is not serious and we no longer have to waste our time. And we brushed the sand off of our sandals and away we went, and it felt fabulous.
Great share. I love it. I love the energy what you're telling that story. I
Oh,
love
well,
it.
it was
I love
so
it.
liberating because we had
Yeah.
already shown him homes. And so he just clearly just wanted to run us around. And it just was like, wow, this is going to be so telling for all of us. So the fear of losing out is a misconception. It's somebody you don't have. So you're not losing anything for somebody who's truly just wasting your time. So that was fabulous. And then the very next day, we had a gentleman who we had shown him many homes last year, and he popped up and said that he had gone to an open home by himself, and he's very interested in this property. We ran comps for him. He wanted to submit an offer. We told him all about this agreement. He said, no problem. And he signed it without issue. We explained that we'd already checked on compensation. Great, all good. So that's the difference between someone who's committed and someone who just wants to run you around. So it was just, I can't explain, like the clarity on it was really empowering. So yay.
Love
it. Great share. Tracy.
It was a great share, Linda. Thanks for that.
Thank you.
So I just had my first showings at my open house in Agawam this weekend, and we had a really great turnout. We ended up getting an offer, a full price with the buyers basically covering the compensation, informational purposes, all that good stuff. So yay, I'm pretty excited.
Awesome, Tracy. Anybody else? Come on, who else had some wins this weekend?
Actually, I just have a question for Tracy. Tracy, so obviously that listing went live before the changes happened, right? So how did that agent structure that offer to just let you know that they were willing to cover the fee? Because it was probably something that was already included in MLS, or just curious to see how that went down.
So I used a new contracts with them because we weren't going to be showing it until after the change. My seller didn't agree to compensation. I explained to him why it's good for him to offer it. So at the open house yesterday, the agent asked me, and I was honest. I let them know, and got some really great tips from some brokers. Just little ways to not on MLS if he was to offer it, how you could tell the other agents, whatever. But the agent wrote the offer, and in the offer he put in the email said the buyers are paying they're offering above asking to cover any compensation for the purchase. So they asked for 2%, and they came in 10,000 over asking, so that more than covers the 2%. And they offered a $10,000 appraisal gap, which I think is basically just covering them in case it doesn't appraise at 460 but appraises at 450.
Just some clarity there, Tracy. Okay. Go ahead, Katie. Did you have something?
No, I think that you're going to ask the question. Go ahead.
Yeah, you started, Tracy, by saying that the buyers were going to just take care of the compensation, but then you said they asked for 2%. So did they ask for a 2% concession? Did they ask for the seller to pay the buyer broker? How exactly
So
did they structure it?
So the way that they worded it was they're offering above to cover the compensation. So there was a request for 2%, um, which would be $9,000, and they offered $10,000 above the asking. So that way they would be covering any commission. I know it's a weird time, and I think this might be this is I think one of the first offers that this particular agent has written with the new rules, just trying to follow the rules as well as we're trying to follow the rules.
But just to be clear here, when we come
Yeah.
up against this scenario, I want to make
Yeah.
sure that the language states that the seller will pay the buyer broker, right? Not Roe v. Homes, because we're
Yeah.
not going to offer co-broke compensation. So it's got to say the seller to pay XYZ brokerage.
That's exactly what it says.
Perfect. Great
All
job.
right.
Great
Thank you.
job. Does anybody just need some clarity around
And
this? Kate, did you have some color?
yeah, I mean, that is a little different than the buyer paying directly, right? So just, I want everyone to make sure that they do understand that as well, right? So in this situation, the buyer is going to be financing the buyer's fee, but the seller is actually going to be the one that is cutting the check to Roe v. Homes. So buyer direct would be at the closing table. The buyer is paying the buyer's agent directly. I just want
Right.
to make
So
sure
if they're
that's clear.
right, so let's say your normal closing costs are going to be $7,000, and if the buyer was paying directly on top of those closing costs, you might have another $7,000 in buyer agent commission. Right. In this case, they might have closing costs of $7,000 for their mortgage and their prepaid taxes, insurance, etc. And then the seller is going to pay their broker. So hopefully we're starting to see how we can structure these deals. Go ahead, Margareta.
Good morning, all. Good luck to us all, right? I actually had to put in an offer, and I was a little bit confused. I thought I had it covered. So I used the new form, obviously, for the offer, and it was very hard to get hold of the selling agent, so I didn't know if there was any compensation. And I didn't really put in the offer because it's a cash deal. And they ask also for the contract, obviously. The seller can ask for the contract, correct? Like the one that it's between me and my buyer?
No.
Oh.
No, that is an agreement between you and your buyer. If your buyer decides, hey, we want to share that, I mean, you absolutely can, but the seller has no right to that. The listing agent has no right to that. I mean, they can ask. You can ask for anything, right?
But I thought that's what they asked for. Do we still have to do the mandatory disclosure then?
Yeah.
I'm confused on that one.
The agency disclosure?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a state law. So in Massachusetts, KB, correct me if I'm wrong.
Yep, Massachusetts and Rhode Island, they're going to have the mandatory state agency disclosures. Those are still going to have to be included, and those you would still send over with your offer. The buyer contract is what Steve's saying you don't necessarily have to send over. But in my opinion, as a listing agent, if my buyer was offering compensation, I may ask for that only because you're not allowed to take more than what your contract says. So it's more of a good faith thing to me, but obviously you would definitely want to get that approved by your buyer before sharing any type of contract that you have between you and your client. That's my opinion.
Right. I almost thought that sharing the buyer contract kind of replaces the mandatory disclosure. I guess that was my misunderstanding. But we still need the mandatory disclosure, sounds like, right?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay, gotcha. So yeah, it was confusing. And then I did submit an offer, and my buyer's actually a cash buyer, and they're going to cover 3% for me. But finally, I asked with the offer submission, I asked what is the seller concessions, if there are any, and they came back it's like 1.5%. So I'm wondering now. I'm looking for guidance here. Like, do I rewrite this offer? Like, how do I make sure that they pay me, the seller as well pays me?
Right. So in the 1.5%, right? You're saying that, remember, let's go with two different terms. There are seller concessions, which help to pay the buyer's closing costs. right? This is something that we've always seen done by a seller. The seller can pay towards closing costs, points, prepaids, escrow payments, right? A seller can do that, or the seller can directly pay your commission. So it can go either way. So you just need to determine if they're going to pay the concessions, then the buyer is going to pay you directly. So that, you know, the funds are going to come from the buyer at the closing.
Which
You
is
can
fine
structure.
either way, considering it's cash deal. But I'm wondering, how do I have to call it out in the offer that I'm still asking for the seller to pay that 1.5%?
Right.
Or,
Is the
or will
one
that
point,
automatically happen? I guess that's the question.
so is the 1.5% specifically to pay your fee, or was it a concession to the buyer in general?
No, it's for the fee for the buyer broker.
Yep. So in the purchase and sale, the new MAR purchase and sale, you can actually break that down, that the seller is going to pay your buyer broker fee. So you can put it right into the purchase and sale. I would have gotten something into the offer as well to just state that.
Okay, so I think because after, you know, she gave me the information after, so I feel like I need to rewrite that offer. I mean, and the deadline's by 5 p.m. today. Rewrite it and include that seller to you know, contribute to like 1.5% to buyer broker.
Buyer broker fee, correct.
Right. So because I feel like, you know, if it's not there, then I'm like, oh, we don't have to pay it, right? I mean,
yeah, I mean, we definitely need to call these things out 100%. So, because remember
that was the confusion.
before you relied on the MLS to say, hey, you said you were going to pay me, right? So now we don't have that MLS anymore saying that you said you were going to pay me. And just as a reminder, anybody that's in Massachusetts that works at Rovi, we did remove the compensation from all of our listings on Friday. You should have gotten a notification about that. So our listings will no longer have the comp in there.
And also,
Jen,
just real
go ahead,
quick, just a
Katie.
reminder in regard to the comp spaces, as of right now, when you guys are putting in a listing, and Alvin already knows this, there is an option to put compensation in there still, an MLS pin. That will be removed completely on the 20th. So it won't be an option, but for right now, you're going to use unspecified.
All right, Jen, I think you were next.
Hi, yes. Okay, so unspecified, and then where do we write that amount? How are we letting people know?
There's nowhere in the MLS. You would just verbalize if you want. You could post it on social media if you want. I just don't see a need anymore to let people know what you're offering. If they ask you, you know, as long as your seller is willing to offer compensation, which hopefully we've had a conversation at the listing presentation to explain why we think it's a good idea. And if somebody says, are you guys offering compensation? You'd say, yes. How much? All depends on the offer. Put your offer together.
Okay. Okay, so if in our listing contract, if the seller says that they would be willing to pay 2%, we don't have to say that unless they ask.
What I'm recommending is we don't negotiate a number with our seller. We just explain to our seller that it would be a good idea to offer compensation. We don't need to pick a number now.
But it asks that in the listing agreement.
Yeah, in our listing agreement, we at Roby Homes, because we have decided to decouple composition, the question you're referring to on that, sorry, compensation,
Yeah.
is always going to be the second option. No, we are not offering it. So you never are going to need the additional document or anything that goes with it. That one
And
in there.
honestly,
Wait.
Jen, just think about it this way. Think about it as the fact that if you are having a conversation with your seller, you're working for your seller in the best interest of your seller. And if you have something in writing that states that your seller is going to give out 3% and the buyer's only asking for 1.5 or 2, then that 3% isn't in the best interest of your seller. So have a conversation that they may be asking, but we don't know what they'll be asking for, and we can negotiate it via the purchase price.
Okay, so on the listing agreement, you want us to leave that blank?
No, you have to select the option that says no. And then Jen, if you read it right below that line where you can select yes or no, there's a disclosure right below that says, sellers understand that this is not the only way you can get paid. There's a good chance that you'll see it as part of the contracts that come in. So it's disclosed on there that there may still be that request for compensation.
You good, Jen?
Okay, no, not yet. So, okay, so it says, so we're supposed to, in the listing agreement, say does not authorize agent to agree or to have listing broker offer a buyer broker fee.
Correct. Yeah, and then explain, right? We're not gonna, this is what the whole lawsuit stemmed from to begin with. Was seller says, shoot, I didn't really understand that I was giving you 6 and you offered 3% out to have somebody negotiate against me. So now we're going into a seller and saying, my fee is 3% or whatever the number that you guys want to charge for your services. And look, it's highly likely that a buyer broker is going to come in and ask for compensation. We'll deal with that when it happens. So now, as long as they're okay with that, somebody asks, are you guys offering compensation? Yes, we are. Well, how much? All depends on your offer.
Okay, so there's not going to be a set amount. And then can you say that again? If the seller says that they would, so I guess we really wouldn't give a number, because I remember hearing somewhere that if in your buyer agreement, you wrote and I think you touched on it this morning too, a lesser amount, then you can't accept more. Can you
Correct,
explain
right?
that?
If your buyer agreement says 2 and the listing agent was offering out 3, you could go back and rewrite your agreement, but you can't take more than whatever is in your buyer broker agreement, which is, again, I think we should be trying to get buyer broker agreements as high as possible. And then saying, hey, look, if we can't negotiate this, I'll negotiate my fee with you, Mr. Buyer.
Okay, so if a seller, that's only if a seller tells you up front, I guess, if they're.
Well, we got to have these conversations. So it wouldn't be if. We've got to have the conversation with the seller to say, hey, look, here's how the new rules work. My fee is X, right? And buyer brokers need to get compensated. Their buyer might pay them, or they might ask us to help with that compensation, because that's how it's typically worked. If that scenario comes up, I'll let you know, and we can decide based on the offers how much you're willing to compensate that buyer agent.
So when would that other form, the agreement to compensate the buyer broker, come into play? Does it at all, or would it just be written in the offer?
Right, that's going to get added to offer, and that other form is added to the purchase and sale, if I remember correctly. I'm looking for KB or Lauren to help with that one. I think the form that you're talking about, Jen, would get added to the purchase and sale.
Okay.
Yeah, my thought was that goes with the purchase and sale as well, and then you would just write the compensation into the offer, but I can get clarification on it if Lauren's not sure. But that was my thought.
Martin, I think you were next.
So just quick question. We're putting in offers. So show 2 homes, both of them are offering compensation. Do I still have to put that in the offer, even though when I called, they said, yes, we're offering compensation?
100%. Yeah,
Okay.
because before we relied on the MLS that we were going to
Okay. I just
guarantee
want to
get
make sure of
paid.
that. Okay.
Yeah. Now it's got to be in our contracts. How is the buyer broker getting paid? And if you look at the contracts in Massachusetts, at least, we don't see this yet in some of the other states. I'm sure it's coming soon. But it'll say, where is the buyer broker fee coming from? Is the buyer paying the whole thing? Is the seller paying a portion of it and the buyer's paying a portion of it? Is the seller paying the whole thing?
Okay.
It'll say right in the contract. Jen, I think you were next.
Yeah, so I have the same question as Martin. So in Connecticut, I put an offer in and I reached out to the listing agent, and she said, yes, there's a compensation, but there's nowhere to put it in Connecticut. Like, did I miss something? Because I put my offer in, but I didn't say, oh yeah, XYZ brokerage is paying buyer's compensation. Was I supposed to?
I'm going to lean on KB and Lauren on this one for the Connecticut docs.
Yeah, so I'm just pulling it up because there was a spot, but I don't
Would
know
it be
that
an
contract.
addendum?
Well,
Isn't
so
there
you
an
can do it
addendum?
you could put anything, honestly, you could put anything on an addendum, and that's always my go-to. So anytime that I don't know where to put something, I will just put see attached addendum, and then I will write whatever I need to write on the addendum. I do think that there's a form, Jen. I'm just trying to find it because I don't remember what it's called.
Okay.
We'll pause. We'll wait. We'll see if we can. KB, you're in front of a computer. You're searching.
Yep. I'm
Okay.
looking.
All right, Lori, I think you were next. You're muted.
Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Okay. Yeah, I had a listing coming on this week, and we had all the contracts signed like 2 months ago, with the old style, and she agreed 2.5% to a buyer's agent at that time. So now clearly I'm gonna have to get these contracts re-signed then, because now they're not valid to current times.
Yeah, I thought there was an addendum that you could change that.
There is. So there's a disclosure. It's Massachusetts, Lori said?
Yeah.
Yeah. So there is a disclosure, a compensation disclosure that you can add in there, and you can write it and just attach it.
Okay. So then now, okay, I come to market. I have no words about compensation anywhere in MLS at all.
No.
What I've heard is you can, like, and I feel like this doesn't sound right, but I'm not sure, but you could even write it on a piece of paper and leave it on the counter, that what you're
Yes.
offering,
Yep.
but you
Yep.
just can't put it in the MLS.
Yep.
Yep.
Can't be
So
in
I
the
can wear-
MLS. So if
I
you
can
wanted
wear
to
a
put a sign
t-shirt
up.
at the open house that says buyer's
Yes.
comp
Yep.
Yes.
right across my
just-
chest, and I'd be cool.
I just can't see the scenario where it's in the seller's best interest to advertise what that number is.
Right.
Maybe if you had a stale listing and you were trying to give like a big number out, 4%, 5% or something to move, then maybe you would start to advertise it. But I really
I
think
don't-
it's like,
I
yeah,
don't
we're
know how to
offering just,
advertise it. So like basically what's going to happen is, but I can't put it in a text or email, or can I?
no, you can.
Yes, you can.
Okay.
Absolutely.
So
Lori, it just
Everything
can't,
but MLS.
right. It can't be in any platform that feeds from MLS. So it can't be in MLS that feeds to a third party. But anywhere else that's your personal whatever, you can put it wherever you want. You can tattoo it on your
Okay.
forehead if you want.
Okay.
Yeah.
So basically, I can talk with the buyer's agents and say yes. And I get what you're saying, Steve, where I can be like, yes, the seller is offering buyer compensation. It's negotiable. Put what you're requesting in the offer.
Yep. Yeah.
Okay. So
And
because
I think
she
we're
agreed
gonna
to
end up-
2.5% now, though, like that we had that conversation, and she's, a little older, and I feel like this is going to get real friggin' confusing for her, and she is out of state. Should I, like, in my head, I'm just like, I don't know. I'm gonna
Look,
have to, when the offers come
that's
in.
up to you. If this one,
Okay.
you've already got it signed, you've got her agreed to 2.5, and you want to just stick to 2.5, like, here's the reality. If you have a great offer that comes in and they want 3, are you going to say no? Of course not, right?
Right.
And if they only
But
ask
couldn't I
for
go
2,
back and say, look, my seller's only agreeing to 2.5%, maybe they'll alter the offer
they might,
then?
right?
I mean,
They might.
in some ways, wouldn't it just be like, I feel like just be transparent, just make it easy. Like, I almost feel like I have an attitude of like business as usual in my mind, just not putting it in MLS, just so that everybody can be compensated fairly and we can just focus on the number that the offer is coming in, like in the past. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. I just feel like it's just
The problem
confusing, I
is,
guess.
here's the reason why I don't think that works, is because now you've got to go and negotiate 5% at your listing appointment if you want to do 2.5 and 2.5. And if you're going up against somebody else, they're going to tell them you only owe 2.5 and we'll see. Right. And so if you've got to come in and say this deal is going to cost you 5% and somebody else says it's going to cost you 2.5 and maybe some more, it's going to be tough to win that listing.
Right.
Right.
I mean,
so
I've
that's
even
where I'm
had
concerned.
agents come in to win a listing in the past before this change and offer to drop their portion of the commission to win it. I've seen that before. You know what I mean? Before all of this. It kind of reminds me of a for sale by owner situation, like when you're putting an offer in to a for sale by owner as a buyer's agent. You know what I mean? You're putting in
That's what
what
it
you're
is, right?
requesting. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I've had
Kinda
a
like-
million, for sale by owners say, nope, I'm not offering. I'm not paying an agent. Okay, well, here's my offer. You have no other offer on the table and my guy can't pay. So we're asking you to pay. All right, I guess I'll pay. Right.
Yeah.
I mean, the sellers really just got to look at the net amount of money that they're getting out of the deal. And if it makes sense for them, they should do the deal. Doesn't matter who they're paying, what they're paying. So, yeah.
And so the
Uh,
seller, when the seller's paying, you know, the buyer's agency, the buyer's brokerage, it's just like the attorneys are cutting the check from the proceeds.
Exactly. I mean, we're just moving some numbers on the HUD, really. You know, we just
And
can't
then
have,
now we're not holding deposits now as a brokerage anymore. The attorneys are holding it, right?
so right now we are still holding deposits. What we're not doing is taking in the co.
Come on.
Oh, hold on.
Because
What
you
we're not
can,
doing is taking in 6% and paying out 3%. So we're, you know, for us, we used to take in a full commission and then pay out a co-broke. Sometimes the attorneys would just cut the checks to both brokerages, right? But on the HUD, even though the attorneys cut the checks from both brokerages, it said that Roe v. got 6 and we paid out 3 or whatever. Now it's going to say that the seller paid that money.
because on the offers, even in Connecticut and in Massachusetts, when you're filling it out, there's a section that says, you know, who's going to hold the deposit, and you can write the attorney's office in there. And I know a lot of
Right.
Connecticut agents do it just to make it easier to get
Yeah.
paid. So
Yeah, the issue that we have in
right now, we just
Massachusetts,
continue doing the same thing, saying that the brokerage is
Yeah.
going to hold it in that section.
yeah, it's the darn attorneys in Massachusetts. A lot of them are just, I don't know. I would love to get to the point where, like most of the other states, the attorney holds the deposit. And I hope that we can get there and we could just, you know, get rid of our escrow account because it's a
Because
nightmare
like
for
for
us.
sale by owners, the attorney does hold it because there's no
Yeah.
agency. So it's just reminding me so much of a for sale by owner mentality as a buyer putting in the offer. You know what I mean?
Yep. You
Kind of
got it.
like how I'm going to think about it. Yeah. Okay, cool.
Yep. Sue, I think you were next.
My question is, like on Showtime, can you, you know, if you have a listing, can you say it in there that your percentage you're
I
offering
don't
up?
believe you can
No,
in showing
you
time.
cannot.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
One other thing that, and I see 2 more hands, we'll get to them. We'll stay over a little bit today. One other thing that I want to bring to everybody's attention that I think you need to start to think about when you take a listing is you're telling the seller and you're negotiating what your fee will be to represent them as a seller. I think we need to start thinking and adding in the additional comment section what the fee will be if we get an unrepresented buyer that comes to the table. Right? Are you going to charge an extra % or 2% or something if that scenario comes up? Because it might come up. All right, we've got to be very, very, very careful with dual, but you might have some unrepresented scenarios. So dual, I've said this before, I believe it's the next lawsuit waiting to happen because it is extremely difficult to have both parties' best interest, you know, and it's very confusing, and to do it the right way, if you really, you know, were to get sued, and I think the attorneys lashed into this, I think they're going to catch you somewhere where you didn't do something right. Unrepresented is different, you know, where the buyer is coming and saying, hey, look, I don't have representation. I just need help facilitating the deal. I'm going to hire all my own people. I think it's going to become a little bit more common. And so it's just something that you need to think about, because I think it's weird to then, when that scenario arises, to then go back to your seller and say, oh, wait, he's unrepresented. I got to do more work. So can you pay me more? Okay, so just start to think about this when you're taking your listings. I think you should add something in there to say, hey, if there is an unrepresented buyer and I've got to help facilitate, you know, I've got to get them docs, I got to point them in the right direction, that there is an additional fee. Margareta, I think you were next.
Yeah, thank you. I guess I just want to clarify. So can I use the addendum to clean up the offer I submitted, or do I have to resubmit that offer? And how is that going to work out when there's deadlines? Let's say that the agent didn't get back to you on time because they're dragging their feet, what the compensation is. How can we deal with this? Like the you know, to include that in the offer eventually.
I think I don't know that you wait for the agent to tell you what the compensation is. I think you just put together your offer and you add that addendum. So I do think you could use that addendum to clean it up, get all parties to just sign that addendum. And I think that that'll clean up your deal. And I think you just start with that. If you're not hearing what the compensation is from the listing agent, just put your offer together and submit.
Yeah, that's what I did. So I'm glad there's this addendum. What is there a name for it, or just the old addendum?
The old addendum, you can just use the blank addendum
Gotcha.
to
Thank
the
you.
contract to purchase. And just so you know, Jen, it's the same thing in Connecticut. So you can either put it in section 9 of the contract where there's other options. You could write it in there, or you can just add it to the addendum to the purchase contract.
Thank you.
So it's okay to put it on the actual offer
Yes.
in other provisions? Okay,
Yes.
cool.
I think you got to get it somewhere, Lori. We got to have this full transparency up front when we're negotiating the deal.
I just thought like the lender couldn't see it or something and it had to be on a separate addendum talking about commissions, but I just want to make sure you can put it in other provisions. You know what I mean?
Yes, you can.
Yep. No, I think this is going to be
That's
full
where it should be.
transparency moving forward. The lenders are going to be aware of this stuff. Jen, you were next.
So I wanted to, well, there's a couple things. One is I was going to say to Lori, I know you were saying you had some concern about redoing the contracts, but if you do that addendum, I think the addendum that KB's referring to just says that the commission's negotiable. And so I guess, I don't know, it seems kind of like confusing, but I guess you could just let her know. And she may, I mean, I don't know if she's just going to electronically sign, but I was going to say, it's just kind of up in the air anyway. So there's a chance that she may have to even pay less than that, but she wouldn't necessarily be required to pay more, right? Because, so I guess that's the good thing about that.
But someone could negotiate differently because right now she's agreed in the old contract 2.5, but if I get like this out of control, amazing offer and the buyer's agent's asking for 3%, I can go to her and discuss it and she can agree to up it if it's like a crazy offer and she's
Right.
like, I want to do it, you know, then I would do an addendum again, probably changing that to the contract for a third part of the contract because the first one I have is old, saying that they're going to get 2.5%. I'm going to have her re-sign it, the addendum, just to be legal right now. I guess at 2.5%, and then whatever somebody comes in with, let's say we wind up at 2%. You know, I think, I don't know.
Well, I guess on that new one,
Yeah.
we're not even writing anything in
Right. On the new one, there'd be nothing in there. And we would just deal with it in the purchase contract.
for the buyer.
Gotcha. And then would this all be noted in the purchase and sale in Massachusetts as well? Like the compensation, like
It-
just as
yeah.
before?
Yeah,
Sure.
if you look at the
That's-
new purchase and sale, Lori, there's actual, in Massachusetts, it's broken down really nicely as to who's paying what.
That's actually my next question because I find it kind of confusing. On that purchase and sale, it says the first part, there's a line that it would say this amounts for the sell
Listing
paid by
brokerage.
the seller to Rovie Homes, right, listing. And then the next one says there's an amount that's going to be paid to the buyer's broker and it's paid by, and then they would select
Break
seller,
it down.
the amount, but then it says a total
Well, no.
fee.
They wouldn't necessarily select seller. They select however
Oh, right,
that buyer
right.
broker is going to,
Yes.
right? Some from the
Exactly.
buyer, some from the seller, some from the mortgage company, maybe.
Well,
right?
it says
And
listing
then-
broker, seller, buyer. Those are the options.
Yeah, so Jen, so
Right.
if the listing broker is offering out compensation, broker to broker compensation, which we are not going to be offering out as a brokerage, but some brokerages may still be doing that, then that number would go in that line. Then if the
Listing
money is
broker.
coming direct from the listing broker. Now, if the listing broker is not offering out a broker to broker compensation, like we would be one of those brokers who's not offering it out, then it would come from the seller directly. And if the buyer is paying you, then it comes from the buyer directly. And those numbers in those 3 boxes have to total the number in section 14 on the bottom line.
Yeah, and I
So-
guess that's what confuses me. It's because it says for a total fee due to the buyer broker of, and then
Yes.
it's the combined number. But is it the buyer broker that pays the selling side then? Because why would that
No.
total fee go to the buyer
You-
broker?
you have to think of it like, because this is going to be the broker's due. So that's not what it says. You have to break it down. I don't want to read the
It's
whole
two-
contract
it's-
because we're
it's
already
two-
over.
It's 2 sections, Jen.
Yeah. It's
The first
multiple
one says
sections.
the listing broker, what they're getting paid. And the second one is the buyer broker. So that between those two, is how much total the seller is going to potentially be paying, right? They might be paying a little bit of the buyer plus the seller. So just disclosing total, how is the listing side getting paid? Total, how is the buying side getting paid?
But there is another section. I have a purchase and sale that was just drafted, I think Friday. And on that last line, they wrote in for a total fee due to buyer broker of, and they combine the two numbers payable
Yeah.
at the
They did
time
it
of
wrong.
performance. That confuses me.
Well, it
Yeah, they did
shouldn't,
it
so
wrong.
it shouldn't be, it should be, so if you're looking at it where it says acknowledgement, the seller and the buyer acknowledge that a fee of whatever for professional services shall be paid by the seller to the listing broker. So that would
Right.
be the number that's going to the listing broker. Right up top. And then down here
Yes.
at the bottom, it says the seller and buyer also acknowledge that a fee for professional services should be paid to blank, that's us, the buyer broker from the following sources. So the stuff in the check boxes is only the amount of money that's going from the buyer broker. And then on that last line for a total fee due to the buyer broker should be a combination of those three sections here.
Jen,
So
if you're not-
we're the listing broker here. So it says the amount that's going to Ruby Homes, and the next part's going. This particular is coming from the seller. The amounts
Jen,
there.
do me a
and the buyer
favor,
brokerage.
just on the side, just text me the address and I'll look it up in Dotloop and I can call you.
Okay. Yeah, that
Yeah.
last line's just really throwing me, and I want to make sure that it's right. You know.
Yeah. Just text me the address and I'll look it up.
And my last question is, are lenders allowing buyers to finance this? Has this become a thing where they are going to encompass commission for their buyer agent if it's not being compensated by the seller?
Oh, it's properties still got to appraise. I just think properties were appraising previously with commissions built in, right? So I don't think anything's going to change. If this is what properties are selling for, and it's normal for sellers to pay buyer brokers, and this is what the houses are worth. Right. So I don't think anything's going to change. It's not like the mortgage companies are now saying you can, build it in. It's just the property still got to appraise, just like it always has. I don't think there's really a change there. Pat, I think you had your hand up for a bit. I don't know if you're still with us. You're muted if you are. I see you still on.
Are you talking to me?
Yeah, you got something for us?
Sorry, my dog was. Not really. I mean, you guys are just kind of going over it. I think it's just a learning curve, right? So the thing I think Jen's caught up on is that it used to be broker to broker compensation, and it's not allowed to do that anymore. It has to be seller to broker. So that's why I think that's why she's a little bit confused there, because it has to be separate. It has to be decoupled. So
that's it.
I think that's why, there's that video that we watched the other day by Sharon. There's like a 25-minute one. They condensed it down, and it's very helpful. Maybe I'll put it in the chat so people can see it, but it's very helpful. I think the one thing you said at the beginning about wins is I had an offer where it was this same thing. There were no compensation in the MLS, obviously. I called the listing agent and I'm writing an offer. She said, we're doing 1.5%. And I said, well, that's a little lower than my typical fee. And I went back to my buyer and I just said, hey, listen, like they're offering 1.5. Typically I get 2 to 2.5. Are you willing to pay my other 0.5%, which would be about $1,000 to give me my full 2%? And she was like, yeah, no problem. So it's just going to be all about having conversations with everyone and just being open and honest and letting them know, hey, listen, normally I get paid 2%. This particular, I don't really want to lower my fee to 1.5. Like, do you have an additional grand that you can give me to make up the difference? Or should we write in 2%? It might hurt your offer if other people are only offering 1.5. But, what do you want to do? And letting the buyer decide, right?
That's it. Just open, transparent negotiations. You can always raise the offer by the, amount that you're off, right? Hey, we love your offer. We do it at 2%, and the buyer can't come up with the extra half. Raise the purchase price by the extra half. Could you run into an appraisal issue? Sure. We used to run into appraisal issues when you're trying to get concessions back. So that could still happen. We'll see how it all plays out, but I think it's a good example, Pat, of how it's going to play out here. So, well, great questions today, guys. And there's going to be tons more questions like this. So let's keep this conversation rolling. every day, jot down your scenarios that are coming up, bring them to this call so that everybody can kind of learn, hey, what's kind of best practices, what's happening in the field, and how do we navigate this all together. KB, did you have something to add?
Just a quick reminder, guys, just look at the calendar. We're going to try to do the Q&As on, I think, Tuesdays or Thursdays, Lauren and I had decided. So if you do have some questions specifically to forms, go ahead and jump on those hour. We're just staying on our computers for an hour. So you can pop in, ask your question, pop off. Like, you don't have to, some people are just hanging around to listen to the questions, whatever, but we'll be on there. We're pulling up the forms too right there. So
Awesome. Awesome. We'll get this right, guys. Great conversations today. Appreciate everybody. We'll talk to you again tomorrow morning. Same time, same bat channel. Take care.
thanks.
Thank you.
Thank
Goodbye.
you. Thank you.